Welcome to the Gluware tutorial on the topic of using the Config Drift and Audit app to take a snapshot of the network device configurations and detect any change from the previous snapshot. The Config Drift and Audit app is an optional package which is installed into and runs from the Gluware control base package. This tutorial is meant to guide you along on your test drive of Gluware. For more information about the test drive, visit gluware.com/test-drive. When running the test drive, you're logging into the Gluware instance with your credentials, which are operational users, so there's some administrative and editing capabilities you will not have access to. So here I am signing into the demo.gluware.com Gluware instance with the credentials I've been provided with, and I get to the dashboard. So let's navigate into the Config Drift and Audit application from the dashboard. What you're going to see in the test drive are the list of nodes that you've already worked with in Device Manager. And all of the grid functions that we've shown you in that tutorial are all remain the same. What you're going to notice here is the captured status. More than likely you're working with a system where the nodes have just been added, so there is no initial capture. So what you see is a question mark, which is an unknown status since the capture has not been executed. So what you're going to do, the very first step in using Config Drift and Audit, if you're using the drift component of it, is you can execute a manual capture. So you can select one or all of your devices and highlight them, and this camera icon will execute the snapshot. So when you click that icon, you have the option to name it. You also have the option to edit a scheduler to perform a reoccurring snapshot. One of the purposes of Config Drift is monitoring the configs over time. So most organizations will want to run a capture on a periodic basis, let's say every 24 hours or even shorter, to understand what's changing in the network. So I'm going to execute a manual capture. And similar to when we ran the Device Manager, you will see the status go and you will see these icons move as Gluware is executing that capture. Similarly also to Device Manager, at any point you can click into these devices and navigate into the log of the job that's being performed. You can also click into the details and you're going to see that live log of the Gluware engine, which is interacting with the device. So as mentioned in Device Manager, anytime the Gluware engine connects to the device, it is always running device detect, so it's refreshing that information available in the Device Manager. And then in this case, we are executing drift, so it is capturing the configuration and then has the ability to compare the capture to any previous capture. In this case, there is no previous capture, so we are performing the initial capture. So we're going to see here within about a minute or so, Gluware is going to perform and complete the initial capture on all the devices in your setup. So the icon you're going to see indicating there is no delta from a previous version are these interlocking circles, which mean unchanged. So I'm going to pause here for a second and hop over to a demonstration system that to show you for demonstration purposes. So I'm going to click to the second tab here, which is another system I have access to, and I'm going to jump into Drift and Audit here. What I want to show you is when drift is detected, you're going to see this changed icon. And then when you see that, you can double click in, and then Gluware is going to give you that side-by-side view showing you exactly how many changes from the preferred initial capture to the current capture. And you're going to see in red what has been removed, in green what has been added, and anything in a dark color like this has been changed. And there's this display mode button which lets you toggle between different views. So display mode 1 is you seeing the full configuration and you highlight through the changes. And display mode 2 here, the two configurations are interwoven, so you see the changes on top of each other. And then, of course, the third you see here, which is the default, which is that side-by-side view, which I happen to like because you're really seeing it, the before and after. And then there's an option to interweave these standard markers to indicate where the drift was detected. So that being said, let's jump back over to the test drive system and what you're seeing. So in this case, you have no drift detected, so it's not very exciting. So part of this use case here we're going to have you do is go ahead and actually create drift. So we're going to edit some parameters and make sure the drift engine is detecting them as a validation. So let's jump over to, go up and click on your main toolbar, and you're going to go into the model editor. And so we're going to be using the model editor for a very specific purpose. So in this tutorial, we're not going to go over all the features of it, but one of the features you do have in the model editor is a terminal window to execute an SSH session to the devices. So what you want to do is click on N for nodes, then you're going to want to click on spoke 1, and once you've clicked on N for nodes and spoke 1, if you don't see this window, on the bottom bar, you'll see the option for a terminal window or your node instance map. Ensure you're clicking on that terminal window. One other thing to point out is that Gluware has these optional floating bars, and in some cases, by default, your bar is not displayed by default, and when you mouse down, that bar will pop up. So one thing you can do if you like, which I do prefer, is to go ahead and click on the option and then pin that bar down. Okay. So now we have a terminal window, and now what we want to do is log into these devices and make a manual change. So we're, in essence, creating drift like someone making an unauthorized change or someone working a ticket and making a change that may very well be valid. So let's click on the connect icon and let's enter the terminal credentials. So it's going to be Cisco as username and Cisco as a password, all lowercase, and click enter. Now the connection it takes a little bit of time because remember Gluware is SSHing into these nodes, and in our case Gluware is SSHing through a proxy server, then from the proxy server it's SSHing into the node itself. So here I am on the terminal access of spoke 1, and what we want to do is just play around with kind of adding and removing features. So one feature that, depending on the state of the way your pod was initialized, you most likely have NTP and name servers configured. So let's do a show command and say show NTP config. And we're going to see on this particular router, I have an NTP server 4.4.4.4 configured. Okay, so before I execute a change, I'm going to do show IP name dash servers. You can use a tab to complete your command. Hit enter. Okay, so the name server is 2.2.2.2. Okay, so what I want to do here is make changes. So I'm going to go into config mode with config space T for config terminal, and I'm going to do no NTP server 4.4.4.4. Enter. And I'm going to do IP name dash server, and I'm going to do 8.8.4.4. Enter. And then I do Control C or exit. And if I want to write it to memory, I can do that as well. WR space MEM. So I just edited the configuration manually on spoke 1 router. Okay, so we've made a change. So let's navigate back to our dashboard and then go back into our drift and audit. And I'm navigating going through the dashboard. You also have a quick access panel here on your right hand side to change app views. So now we're going to run a second snapshot. So just for fun, we're going to select all our devices again and click execute a capture and hit start capture. And again, the engine is going to go out to those devices, run a device detect, update the device manager inventory information, and then execute the config capture and comparison. This time it's going to be comparing it to a previously known state, which was that initial capture. And so we have expectation that config drift will identify drift, in this case, on that device. So in this pretty controlled environment, I don't expect to identify change in any other devices. So again, anytime you're running an action like a drift or a device manager, you can always click into any of the nodes and then look into the log and actually see what the engine is doing line by line with the device, and you get a sense of exactly what kind of interaction the intelligent orchestration engine is having. So as you see it begin to complete here, it's executing all these in parallel. Gluware is a very scalable system. You can have multiple provisioning servers to execute things like drift and audit and config change on tens of thousands of devices in an hour, for example. So what we have here in the result is a changed icon. If I double click on that, particular device, it's going to show me that Gluware has detected two changes. So again, I have my before kind of previous capture. I know that because it has a star, and I have the current capture. All of these are time stamped, and I can use these arrows to actually step into see what has changed. So I can see name server that was just 2.2.2.2 has been essentially removed and re-added that it is IP name server 2.2.2.2 and 8.8.4.4. So in the name server configuration, it kind of stacks the name servers all in one line. It detects that in the configuration, so that's good. And the next one is I can see in my previous config, I had NTP server 4.4.4.4, and here it's been removed. So you have different options here. One is if this change is what you expected and you view this new config on the right is what you want to be your preferred config going forward, you go ahead and just click the set default star, and that becomes the new default going forward. So essentially if it's an approved change, you just approve it and move forward. The second option, and what we're going to get into in a couple of use cases, is using Gluware to remediate. So assuming Gluware is managing features like NTP and name servers, you can use Gluware to remediate and get the configuration of this node and any other nodes into a good state. So that is what we're going to get to in one of the future use cases as we get into the config modeling capability. So at this point, this tutorial of drift is concluded, and I look forward to continuing on with your test drive. Thank you.